Welcome back. Uh, Today we are going to take a look at the cost of production of a firm. Recall that we derive the demand curve uh, when the demand curve of an individual, when that individual maximizes utility from consumption. In the same way, we are going to derive the supply curve of an individual firm when that individual firm maximize, maximizes his profit. A firm's profit can be defined as total revenue minus total cost, and the total revenue of a firm is the price an item is sold times the quantity produced and sold. So price and quantity will give you, just as if you are in business selling, the revenue you make a day depends on the quantity of the goods you sold out and the price at which the goods are sold. So the price and quantity gives you total revenue. Then the total cost is the amount incurred by buying the production inputs in order to produce the outputs. Is what we call the total cost. At the beginning, so mathematically, the profit function is defined as pi, which is a function of q is equal to pq minus c into bracket q. We want to follow a convention in economics. What normally happens is that when we are dealing with a firm, we use small letters. So instead of a P capital Q, it should have been P small q into bracket Q. Meaning it's a function of total revenue is a function of uh, output Q. So minus cost, which is also a function of output Q of the firm. Uh, Now, at the beginning of this course, we focus a lot of our attention on how to determine the price of an output, the quantity of goods and services produced, and goods and services consumed. And so we look at the market and how demand and supply determines the price of an item. So in this profit function, we have seen how the price is determined earlier. Then with respect to the Q, which is the output under production, we also saw how firms combine inputs in order to produce an output. So today our focus is to look at the cost aspect of this profit function. So we are going to focus on the cost that the firm incurs as it produces an output Q. Cost of production simply refers to the expenditure that is incurred in producing a unit of a good or a service. The entrepreneur, in order to assemble resources to produce, must pay for those resources by way of land, natural resources, labor, and the human effort, and the capital. So these resources that are combined to produce a good must be paid for in the form of rent, wages, and interest. So it is in this process that cost is derived. So you pay for inputs and you use these inputs to produce a good. So the total cost paid to get this input in order to produce an output is the total cost. Cost can be viewed from two angles, from society's point of view and from the individual's point of view. In this course, our analysis of cost will be based on the individual's point of view. That is how much it costs an individual to buy an input in order to produce a commodity. Uh, we are going to look at the traditional theory of cost. So, as we have said earlier, cost is incurred when commodities are produced. When we are analyzing, there is a close link between cost of production and output produced. So, as I've said that production can be analyzed in two time periods, short run and long run. In the same way, since cost is closely associated with output produced, we can also analyze cost uh, in two periods, a short run cost and the long run cost. Since output that we have discussed in this course is a short run production function, we'll limit ourselves to short run cost functions or short run cost analysis under this topic. In the short run, we are told, or we may told that some factors of production are fixed whilst others are variable. The variable factors are the factors that vary with the level of output, while the fixed inputs remain constant during the production process. Now, the cost that is incurred on the use of the fixed input is called fixed cost, while the cost that is incurred on the variable input is known as the variable cost. So the sum of the fixed cost and the variable cost constitute the total cost of production. The fixed cost includes salary of administrative staff, uh, the number of goods produced will not determine the number of or will not vary with the number of administrative staff. The top management of a company will remain the same, uh, at least in the short run. So the expenditure on the administrative staff doesn't depend on the output produced. Then depreciation of machinery. Um, Factory machines undergo wear and tear, and for that matter, they have to be replaced over time, whether used or unused. So the money that is set aside to take care of this wear and tear is known as the depreciation. Then expenses for building. You need to do maintenance of the building, painting, and changing rotten window frames, and all those things. Whether you produce or not, or the number of goods you produce has nothing to do with those expenses. Then expenses for land maintenance. You need to clear the land, make the environment beautiful, and to avoid snakes and other reptiles from taking over the place. Then the return to the entrepreneur is also treated as a fixed cost, because once the person remains in business, it's like the person is in employment and he has to be paid for uh, the work he's doing, which is the normal profit in the case of a perfectly competitive firm. Uh, so the normal profit is the return to the entrepreneur. So as I said, fixed cost is incurred whether production takes place or not in the short run. For this reason, it is fixed for all levels of output. Total fixed cost is graphically denoted by a straight line parallel to the output axis, and this guy is shown in this diagram. So over here, you see that the fixed cost for each unit of output is the same. The total cost doesn't vary. The fixed cost doesn't vary with the level of output produced. The variable costs are costs incurred on variable inputs, and they include the cost of raw materials, cost of direct labor, running expenses of fixed costs such as fuel, ordinary repairs, and routine maintenances. If you take direct cost of labor or cost of direct labor, let's take a simple production process, a block manufacturing factory. Depending on the output the firm wants to produce, will determine the amount of laborers that will be required in a day. So when the firm wants to produce more output, it will employ more people that day. And if you also employ less, produce less, they will employ less number of people. So the more the output, the more the direct labor. For that matter, the higher the cost. So you can see that the cost of direct labor varies with the level of output. The reason why it is a variable cost. So the variable cost changes with the level of output. When output is zero, the variable cost is also zero. As output increases, the variable cost also increases. That is the cost functions, the variable cost function is an increasing function of output, meaning the higher the output, the higher the cost. The variable cost has a broadly inverse S shaped, which reflects the law of variable proportion or the law of diminishing returns. And the total variable cost is shown in the diagram below. So this is how the total variable cost curve looks like. Actually, it is a reflection of the law of diminishing returns. See, in the production process, output initially increases at an increasing rate. So this translates into total cost increasing at a decreasing rate. As output increases at a decreasing rate, it translates into total cost increasing at a decreasing rate. And if you know how to calculate the slope of a curve, you appreciate what I'm saying. So the total cost of production is the sum of the total fixed cost and the total variable cost. So again, total cost of production is the sum of the total fixed cost plus the total variable cost. Is the sum of total fixed cost and total variable cost. As I said, total cost is an increasing function of output, meaning as output increases, total cost also increases. Total cost curve also behaves in a similar way as the total variable cost, with its inverse S shape above the total fixed cost. The behavior of the total cost curve is determined by the behavior of the total product curve. As I said earlier, there is just a mirror image of the total variable total output. The total cost is a mirror image of the output curve. So when total product curve increases at an increasing rate, total cost curve increases at a decreasing rate, as I said earlier. On the other hand, as the total product curve increases at a decreasing rate, total cost increases at an increasing rate. So this is how the total cost curve look. So the total cost curve is the curve at the top, labeled TC. When you are reading many books, you may see total cost. You may see total cost being written in a short form as TC. So and total variable cost as TVC, and the fixed cost as FC. If you divide this if you divide this expression, total cost, which is equal to fixed cost plus the variable cost, by output Q, you have an expression like this. And the first expression, which is total cost over output, is known as the average cost. Then TFC over Q, which is total fixed cost over output, will give you the average fixed cost. And the TVC, which is total variable cost over output, to give you average variable cost. So let's look at the average fixed cost. So the expression TFC over Q, is the ratio of total fixed cost to the corresponding output level, gives the average fixed cost. Plotting the average fixed cost against the corresponding level of output gives us the average fixed cost curve. The average fixed cost curve is a continuously falling curve as output expands and approaches zero asymptotically. Maybe it doesn't get to zero, but it approaches zero as output approaches infinity. In other words, a average fixed cost curve is a rectangular hyperbola showing at all its points the same magnitude. Yeah, so it is shown below. So this is how the average fixed cost curve looks like. If you look at this expression, the TFC over Q, you see that the TFC is constant. So as the Q increases, that entire ratio will begin to decline, become smaller and smaller and smaller. And the next one we'll look at is the average variable cost. The expression total variable cost divided by output gives us the average variable cost. The TVC over Q will give us the average variable cost. So if you plot this average variable cost against the corresponding output level, give us the average variable cost curve. The average variable cost curve is also U-shaped, reflecting the law of variable proportion. The AVC curve is depicted in the diagram below. So it is U-shaped. It has a U-shape, open U-shape, like this. It's as a result of the law of the variable proportion. So when output increases at an increasing rate, it translates into falling average variable cost. But when output begins to increase at a decreasing rate, it translates into average cost rising. So there are a whole lot of ratio between output and cost. So we can derive this average variable cost from the total variable cost from this graph. If you draw a line from 0, the origin, to touch any point on the total variable cost curve, and you find the slope of that line, then the slope of that line will give you the average variable cost at that point it touches on the total variable cost curve. So if you can see that initially it will be decreasing the slopes. If you draw a line from the origin to be touching the initial parts of the total variable cost, the slopes will be declining until it gets to the minimum point. Then further beyond, it will start rising again. So if you plot those points, you see that it will be a U-shaped curve. So let's look at the average cost curve. The expression total cost over outputs give us the average cost. When this average cost is plotted against the corresponding output levels, we have what we call the average cost curve. And this average cost curve also has a U shape. It's just having the same shape as the average variable cost. And this U shape is a reflection of the law of diminishing returns. When total output increases at an increasing rate at initial levels of production, it translates into average cost decreasing. That is, total cost will begin to increase but at a decreasing rate, and that will translate into falling average cost. When output after a point begins to increase but at a decreasing rate, it translates into cost increasing at an increasing rate, and that translates into average cost rising. So it is shown in the diagram below. And we can also graphically derive this average cost curve by drawing a line from the origin to touch any point on the total cost curve. Initially, you can see that if you draw the curve from the origin to touch any point on the total cost curve, initially, and you find the slopes. The slope will initially be decreasing until they'll get to their minimum, and after that, they will begin to rise again. So if you plot these slopes at the various points on a graph, you will realize that the average cost curve is U-shaped. It initially decreases because the slope from the origin to any point on the graph, to any point on the total cost curve, initially the slopes will be decreasing. So as the output increases, as you move from left to right, the slopes will be decreasing. But to get to a point when it will get to the minimum, but beyond that point, it will begin to rise again. So it will also have a U shape, which reflects the law of variable proportion. So if you add the average fixed cost plus the average variable cost, average fixed cost plus the average variable cost, will be arriving at average total cost. Some people call it average cost, just average cost. Others, when you are reading some books, you'll see average total cost. It doesn't make any difference. So the average cost is just the sum of average fixed cost plus the average variable cost. Just as we saw under production, a firm may want to increase its output by employing an additional unit of labor or a variable input. As you employ more units of the variable input, you incur a cost in an attempt to produce another output. So the cost you incur in an attempt to produce another output by employing factors of production is known as the marginal cost production. And the marginal cost is technically the slope of the total cost curve. So the slope of a total cost curve is simply the slope of a tangent to the curve. If you draw a line to touch the total cost curve just at a point, if you find the slope of that straight line touching the total cost curve, then that will give you the marginal cost at that level of output. So the marginal cost can be computed as a total change in total cost divided by the change in output produced, and which is the same as total cost 2 minus total cost 1 divided by output level 2 minus output level 1, which is the same as total variable cost 2 minus total variable cost 1 all over Q2 minus Q1. As an exercise, go and find out how come you can use these two formulas to calculate the marginal cost, and they will give you the same result. So when the marginal costs are plotted against the level of output, we have what we call the marginal cost curve. The marginal cost curve is also U-shaped, reflecting the law of variable proportion. So this is the graph of the marginal cost curve. When you put all the graphs together, short run average cost, short run average variable cost, average fixed cost, and the marginal cost curve, will have something looking like this. It is important to take note of how these graphs should be drawn. The first point is that the marginal cost cuts the average cost curve. That's the first curve from the top. The marginal cost cuts it at the minimum point of the short run average cost. The same way, marginal cost cuts the short run average variable cost at the minimum point of the short run average variable cost. So the marginal cost curve touches these two curves at their minimum. But when you look closely at the graphs for the first two curves, that is short run average cost and short run average variable cost, you can see that the marginal cost touches the marginal cost is equal to the short run average cost curve at a lower output than it is equal to the short run average cost. The next thing we'll talk about is the mobility of factors of production. Uh, when you operate in a competitive market, factors of production will always move from one employment to another. Even as an employer, you may want to employ the resource at the lowest cost. That will give you the highest output. So just as you are thinking of employing labor at the lowest cost, labor is also looking, or owners of factors of production are also looking for employers that will give them the highest return for the use of their inputs. So because of this condition of economic agents always trying to get the best out of every situation, will always look for opportunities that will give them the highest return or compensation for their use in production. When it comes to this situation, we can talk about two scenarios. One which we call the geographical mobility. That is a resource, usually labor or capital, moving from one place to another. Let's say you are in Ghana here and you decide to relocate to Japan or US. That is what we call geographical mobility. And a lot of people do it. You are working in Ghana, you feel that what you are being paid is too small. So you want to travel to a place where you can earn higher, or you are in a village where you think that the income you earn is too small, looking at your capabilities and your skills. So you want to go to a city and earn a higher income. That is what we call geographical mobility. And economic resources will always want to look for a place where they can get the highest rate of return. Then you can also talk about occupational mobility. That is when people switch from one job to another because of maybe the compensation, the job, the income is not good, or as a result of changes in technology. Sometimes technological changes can make your skills obsolete. That will force you to leave that job and acquire new skills to be able to be productive. So let's say somebody who is an accountant decide to abandon the accountancy profession to become a computer programmer. So the person is switching from one job, one profession to another. This could happen in the same location or from one location to another. So we have these two mobility of factors of production: geographical mobility and occupational mobility. There may be several reasons why resources may want to move from one, but the main economic reason is the reward the owners of those factors of production want to get. They want to get the highest. So they want to look for an employment where they can get the highest pay for their use in production. Uh, then I will briefly talk about economies of scale. This concept is actually related to long run production. But it's good that we have some idea about what economies of scale is. Economies of scale has to do with the cost advantages that accrue to a firm or an industry, or firms in an industry, as a result of a large scale production. When firms produce on large scale, it comes with certain cost advantage, and those cost advantage translate into lower average cost of production, and that cost benefits, which is the lower average cost of production, is what we are calling economies of scale. So the cost advantage that goes with large scale production. We can distinguish between two economies of scale: the internal economies of scale and external economies of scale. Internal economies of scale are the cost advantages that a firm enjoys as it becomes larger and larger. The firm itself. So the meaning the benefit is as a result of the firm's own initiative. So it's the cost advantage is internal to the firm. But firms, a collection of firms, which we call industry in economics. And when we talk about industry in economics, we are talking about a collection of firms that produce similar outputs. When we talk about a market, we are talking about a collection of firms that sell similar products in a particular market. So firms when an industry is becoming bigger and bigger, with a lot more members, and there are certain cost advantage that accrue to the firms there. So the the advantage they derive as the industry expands is what is known as external economies of scale. Some of these advantages can be pooling of resources. Let's say firms want to go to the harbor and bring raw materials. Instead of each company taking a truck there, they can all pool their resources together and just send one truck to go there, and it will save costs for all of them. So some of the sources of the internal economies of scale are some of the sources of the economies of scale are lower cost of finance, lower cost of advertising, lower transport cost. These are all advantages that come with the producing on a very large scale at a firm. I think with this we should be coming to the end of this topic. Thank you very much.